dance for joy or lust or anger, and every time you haven't got it right.
Sensible Secondhand Classics, the series where we look at practical and sensible cars that are over 15 years old you could buy between a budget of £1,000 and £5,000. This is a 1994 Ford Granada Mark III 2-litre LX saloon. But is it any good? Should you care? Let's find out, shall we? So the Mark III Granada was launched in 1985. Actually a very early example of one of those, a Granada Scorpio, yes, Granada Scorpio, was used in an episode of Cat's Eyes called Frightmare. It's actually the same car but was driven in a 1985 publicity video for the new Granada by Tony Bastable, if you remember him. Scorpio was the name that was used in a lot of other countries to differentiate the Mark I and Mark II Granadas from this new model, but Ford realised they'd made a bit of a sort of rob their own back by changing the replacement for the very, very beloved Cortina into the Sierra that seemed far too radical when it was launched in '82, particularly with a new name and everything like that. So they decided for the British market only, I believe, the cars would be called the Granada as a continuation of the previous models, and Scorpio would just be a trim level. The base engine when the car came out, that wasn't around very long actually, was a 1.8 Pinto engine with 90 horsepower. There was also a 2-litre version of that Pinto until 1989, and I think over 105 horsepower, 115 horsepower. When the Ford twin cam engine came out in '89, that's in this car, you could get it with fuel injection on 125 horsepower, although this later car with the Cat developed 120 horsepower. I've also seen it as 115 horsepower, so I'm not quite sure about that. Let's talk about the more exciting engines though. The 2.4 V6, which was available until 1989, developed 130 horsepower. It was a sort of evolution of the old 2.3 that was in the Mark II Granada. Then we got up to 2.8. That was carried over directly from the Mark II, complete with the gearbox selection, the Type 9 and the 3-speed auto. Or was it 4-speed? I think it's 4-speed actually. It's 150 horsepower. Then the 2.9 later on, which developed the same power, initially 150, and then later on it's 145 when fitted with a catalytic converter. However, if that's not enough for you, you can go for one of the Scorpio Cosworths. Now that developed having 195 horsepower, but I've seen it quoted in some places as over 200 horsepower, so I'm not quite sure he's right about that. There are also some diesels available, but as usual, due to controversial government legislation and all kinds of other reasons, we don't talk about diesels on this channel. What we need to talk about is the fact that it's actually quite manoeuvrable. It's more manoeuvrable than the Sierra that they have at Great British Car Journey, but I drove in 2021. It has the same engine and gearbox in it. I don't know if that's not running right or something, but this just seems a bit easier to sort of twirl through the cones. I'm not quite sure why that would be, but you know, there we go. Yeah, quite easy to drive once you get used to the gearbox. You have to sort of get used to the really long throw on this. Type 9s are sort of similar to this as well. But yes, it's actually quite pleasant. It's not very fast, this. It doesn't feel fast at all. It's not a Scorpio Cosworth, and it's not a 4x4 version. Gosh, the 4x4 versions, those are pretty tasty. Yeah, it's fine. You can imagine just cruising around in this, sort of being used as a taxi, and it being absolutely adequate for the job, particularly if you need lots of space, and by gosh, there's lots of space in this car. Apologies for the wind noise and the road in the background, by the way, viewers. So let's have a look at this very late, quite low specification Mark III Granada. Looks very different from the original car that came out in '85. This one is a really, really late one. It's a 1994. I think these are the original plates for it as well. The Scorpio came out later that year, which is called the Scorpio in all markets. But we better not talk about that, particularly as for one that I've already driven on the channel. We can't discuss that anyway. So facelift occurred in 92. The saloon had come out in, I think, 1990 actually on these. So we've got these nice smoked rear lights. Very, very, very big boot. Actually, the wheelbase on this is massive as well. They're big old cars, these. They're nice and comfortable. Reassuring that rear lights are made in Germany. Do we push that button, or do we... Oh no, push button, there we go. Yeah, it's quite a big boot. It's not quite as big as I thought, possibly because it's not that deep on this. But if you wanted even more space, I suppose you go for the hatch or you go for the estate. Either would be great. Got Ford something in there. Is that like a CD changer or something? Probably isn't in a car like this. Yeah, spares underneath there. It's just steel wheels on this. They're obviously aftermarket trims, but it's probably part of the history of the car, so they've left them on, which is good. Very recent addition to the fleet, this one actually, along with the Montego over there and the 3500 Vitesse. So yes, I prefer like a Scorpio or even a Gear. That's just my preference. So some of you will quite like the fact that this isn't either of those, and it's quite a survivor car, this. It's not perfect cosmetically or anything like that, but it looks really sort of honest. You can even see the sort of repairs where someone's had to cut fully the arches, which is a common issue on these cars. But yeah, very presentable nevertheless. I'm looking forward most of all though to sitting in the back, and you can see the amount of legroom that's in here. It is unbelievable. And on some of the cars, I think even on the very early Scorpios and some others, you could get electrically reclining rear seats. See, this one doesn't have that. But look at all this space. This is absolutely ridiculous. Look at that, it's stretched out like a limousine. Oh, it's really comfortable as well. This is just like a stretched version of a Sierra platform. It feels sort of different, but strangely familiar at the same time. Anybody who would have climbed into one of these in the 80s and 90s would have immediately been struck by the fact that it feels like a very, very large Sierra, because that's what it is. Look at the size of these doors, they're huge. Very sort of familiar, comforting velour fabric from sort of typical places of the period. Ashtray in either one of these doors. The old Ford way of locking the doors from the inside. Electric rear windows. So this is really strange. Electric rear windows are not on that switch, they're probably down in the middle, which they are. Bizarre. Why don't I just put them on there? Oh well. Yeah, we got little bits of carpet at the bottom. Funny enough, the Mark II Granada that I've driven also has sort of this velour. It's like a Chatsworth velour, but it is obviously different. In fact, it's 12 years older than this car. Sunroof as well, but it's a manual sunroof on the specification. Do we get a rear armrest in this sort of very, very comfortable rear? Yeah, we do. It kind of moves up and over like that as well. See if we can show that. Here we go, look. And point of a cigarette lighter, no map pockets. That's a bit stingy, isn't it? We do have seatbelt height adjustment though, which is good. I kind of don't want to get out of the back. It's really, really comfortable in here. Even though these headrests are, I don't even know if they move up. It looks like they're sort of fixed like that. I will have to get out of here though. It should be really easy. You can see why so many of these were used as taxis back in the day, can't you? It's really easy to get out. The car reminds me of in terms of the room in the back. There's another car at Derbyshire car journey. It's the Daimler V8 they've got here, which is a long wheelbase version. Right, the seat height adjuster is just down there. And again, I mean, I probably need to go back slightly to sort of drive this a really long way, but it's really good. Oh, that's so comfortable. Typical kind of 1980s, 90s Ford dash. Same controls in the middle here as that Mark IV Escort over there. Then sort of Sierra, I think, derived switches, which as well were in that Escort. And then as well we've got the typical Ford thing of the era, the Has a light switch up there, and we've got the latest style of keys, because there was a time when I think they changed the supplier of the keys, and there were only about 7 keys for all the all the cars, so you could easily steal one if you wanted to. 5-speed manual in this one. I think it's the MT75 gearbox. The earlier manual was the Type 9 gearbox. Big spaces to put maps and things. That's where the electric mirror switch that you see in absolutely everything in the 90s and 2000s comes from. Not just Fords, but all sorts of other things as well. And those electric mirror switches probably from one of these. Normal handbrake. Yep, there are the electric rear windows. We've got something in here. Oh, we've got some tape storage and more tape storage. I like tape storage solutions, yes. And then we've got the 2006 RDS Ford radio with key code. We'll leave that one alone. You could get a heated front screen on these right from the start. I think it was Scorpio trim level had it as standard, which, considering you get ABS, electric rear reclining seats, and a heated front screen as standard on a car in 1985 is really advanced, actually. Glove box, to see the mission documents actually go in. Oh, we've actually got as well a bit of service history in there. There's a little shelf. I'll have to get the book out in a second. Yeah, bits of wood trim, and Richard Furious driving stuff when he drove the Mark III Granada. Those sort of symbols by the little wheel here that you move do look a bit incongruous on there. Little quartz clock, probably not a trip computer. That's probably reserved for some of the higher trims. But yeah, one thing that has changed fundamentally from the Mark II Granada is the fact that you don't get the wiper stalk next to the place for turning on the lights. You get a separate switch just there with the parking light function, and it makes bonging noises. Is that fog lamps? If you pull it out, just see. Yeah. Right, well, let's have a look at the engine, shall we? So here is Ford's 2-litre twin cam engine, chain driven. This one, I believe, it'll have a cat on it if it's a 94, around 120 horsepower. I've heard figures of 115 before. I think the non-cat version of this engine developed 125. I might be wrong about that though. So there is the power steering fluid, coolant reservoir, windscreen washer. Like a lot of 1990s Fords, the essential maintenance things in the car are actually all marked in yellow. You can see they're all marked in yellow on that side, all 3 of them. Dipstick is at the back, because you can see it's a longitudinally mounted engine and it's rear wheel drive. Dipstick is just there. It looks a bit lost in here, but that's because you can get up to 2.9 litre V6s in this if you go for the Scorpio Cosworth, which had the most powerful engine. So yeah, maintenance actually doesn't look too bad. You open up a Sierra engine bay, it does look similar to this as well, but that's no surprise. Does this look better than the pre-facelift cars? I don't know. It looks more modern. It's more reminiscent of later Sierras, and then the Mondeo, which actually was out by the time that this car was made in 1994. Right, I suppose we'd better go for another drive, viewers. So just at these sort of low speeds at the Great British Car Journey, it's not really the kind of natural home for one of these big old Granadas, but it feels fine. It feels like I'm actually in some kind of 1990s police drama. I'm some kind of an undercover detective who hasn't done very well because I've only got the 2-litre Granada, not the V6. And I'm, you know, on my way to a rendezvous at an industrial estate somewhere. It feels very much like that, and you see these so much in television shows at the time. I mean, the latest series of MTV Makepeace have a Mark III Granada in them, for example. Yeah, I quite like it. I mean, Mr. Coleman, who is an expert on Mark I and Mark II Granadas, I've driven a Mark I at Great British Car Journey before. In fact, you can drive this very car. It's just come onto the fleet, and you can maybe also drive the Mark I if you want to compare them. But the Mark I and Mark II, very similar cars underneath, And I have driven Mr. Coleman's Mark II Granada, which is one of the best in the country actually. And they don't feel like one of those, but if you're just driving around on the road normally and you're not kind of, you know, power sliding and things like that, this is probably fine. And I'm sure lots of you have very, very nostalgic memories of these. One thing I do remember was that in 1994, I think it was, about the same time this car was made, I went to hospital in the back of one of these because I fell off my bike and broke my arm, and it was very comfortable on the way there. So that's something that I've always remembered about these. A friend of mine, his father had several Granadas and Scorpios, and he had I think it was a Granada rather than a Scorpio at the time, and I went in the back seat, and seems to be alright now. Wonderful. Let's look now at some Mark III Granada or Scorpio trim levels. So we have the base L, then the GL, the LX, like this one, the GLX, the Gear, the Scorpio, that was a trim level rather than a model name in this country, the Gear X, the GLS, the LS, the Executive, that sounds very nice, and then the Scorpio 4x4. The Scorpio that followed this, yeah, let's not get into that now. That's a story for another time. So viewers, should you consider a Mark III Granada as a sensible second-hand classic for your hard-earned budget between £1,000 and £5,000? Well, I don't see why not. There are still some of these around. I'd prefer a higher trim level that didn't have a plastic steering wheel, but that's just me. Some of you will find this LX model all that you ever need. They are very comfortable, very nice to sort of cruise around in, very spacious, but obviously suffer from the same problems as lots of other Fords of the year, particularly the Sierra. You know, rust is a big problem. Electrical issues by this stage, parts availability I'm not sure is as good as something like, I don't know, a Mark 4 or 5 Escort. But yeah, particularly the V6 models, quite appealing cars in my opinion, although they're nothing like the Mark 1s and Mark 2s. Anyway, thank you ever so much indeed once again for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, leave a comment below, and we shall see you again very soon for some more reasonably priced nostalgic motoring.